Today I'm going to show you the urban sketching techniques I've taught online and in person to literally thousands of people. And I know for loads of them, it's helped them to loosen up, find their style and just enjoy their art a whole lot more. Even as a beginner, you'll be able to sketch along. There's no perfect lines needed, just a little bit of energy and a willingness to take some risks. Now to do a demonstration and so you can sketch along, we're going to travel together to Ghent in Belgium, sketching this beautiful and colourful scene together. If you've ever wanted to do a bit of urban sketching and felt unsure, then you are in the right place. I'm going to show you step by step every part of the process, from my pen lines, setting out those shapes, through to those loose colours and little finishing touches. By the end of this video, you will have your own funky little artwork, another page in your sketchbook full, and you'll feel good about yourself. Tick one item off the doing something for yourself, doing something to relax, to-do list. You can see as I flick through my sketchbook here, the kind of thing that we might well be making today. Loose lines, so using some kind of ink pen, and then a little bit of watercolour. And maybe if you've got it, some watercolour pencils or something like that. But the basics are just ink and watercolour. And here we have our reference. So this is, as I said, from Ghent. And we can see lots of intricate details, different colours, quite a lot going on. But I'm going to show you how we simplify it. We find these big shapes as our starting point. And from there, I promise you, it's more than achievable, absolutely more than achievable. Now, I know many people are tempted at this stage to pick up a pencil, but I'm going to say pencils are evil. And it's because we get used to them, we get used to rubbing out, and we get stuck making perfect lines. So instead, be brave, grab an ink pen. I'm using this fine liner and my sketchbook. So this fine liner is going to be flexible for me. I'm not going to allow myself to be constrained. I'm going to flow across both pages. That way it's already a bit imperfect, but also the sketchbook becomes part of the art. Our first step is to focus on these big shapes and the clear outlines, just the things which really jump out at us without making it rigid. Give your line room to breathe, let it wobble. Instead of trying to be perfect in your measurements, cross-check things. So we've got all these big shapes and we can see, where do these roofs intersect? Where do they line up? About how big are the different shapes? And about is good enough. It's when we forget that about is good enough and actually trying to be perfect is often rigid and boring, that we become, ironically or foreseeably, a bit rigid and boring. So I'd really encourage you to just get it about right, loosen up. Then look for these little things, these kind of shapes here, which are disrupting any straight line. Now the principle here is if you're going to be rigid and you're going to sort of inject too much straightness into your lines, you're going to miss all these little flourishes, these little plants, the broken bricks, and all the things which actually break up straight lines naturally. In nature, certainly, but even in urban scenes, there are very few straight lines. Even the bottom here is not a straight line. Look, plant here, plant there. Already our sort of straight line is broken up. So step one, what we're currently doing, is finding those big shapes, but allowing some texture and some fun into those lines and not assuming they're all big straight lines. Look for doorways, even in a non-river scene, and I'm not sure exactly why there's a doorway onto this river. I suppose for a boat. Silly question. But even in a normal street scene, you'll find doorways are always breaking up the bottoms of houses. Now, we've got this right-hand side of the scene. It's clipped off in the photo, but a little bit of invention is great. So I'm going to invent and finish off that right-hand side. Before looking for more shapes, look at the tops of these roofs, more shapes. They could feel scary, but we could just see them as simple shapes. So we've got a triangle here, nice and easy. Move along, we've got a simple rectangle, also nice and easy. Here, we come to a bit of confusion. We've got some complex perspective. So we could do this. We could pop our pen on and measure it and get it about right. Or we could keep everything kind of vertical. This way, what we're doing is we're basically imagining that this scene is facing us. We're eliminating some of the perspective which is unnecessary for making our art look interesting and might actually make our art look cluttered and untidy, especially if we're unconfident about getting it. Now, here's a really important thing. Look, I've made a mistake, but I can just calm down, correct it a tiny little bit with one line and move on. Don't overcorrect mistakes. Just let them be, especially this early on, and they will fade into the distance later. Now we've got a few more of these kind of shapes, and it's easy to get sucked in, and neglect to kind of see the whole scene. And actually, some of these shapes in the background add a lot to the depth and the interest of the scene, and they make things more interesting. They kind of stack on top. So I'm going to stack them on top, and again, do a little bit of my own invention. Notice here, this triangle, it kind of perfectly overlaps the roof. I don't like it, so I'm shifting it to the left so that we don't have it lined up so perfectly. That makes it more easy to understand as a viewer, more easy to sketch for me. It stops it looking like it's a continuation of one roof, and we know that it's a different roof. For me, I also love my chimneys, so I'm going to add these in now. And it's about this point you might notice things that you could have drawn already. And don't worry, if you need to draw something on top, like I'm going to draw this chimney on top of my previous lines, that is fine. Lines can cross over, no one cares, no one will even notice by the end of this sketching process. So allow yourself a few details to overlap on top of the previous things. There you go, one more thing I've forgotten, another complex roof with some complex perspective, or just turn it into a triangle. Now we're going to shrink our shapes. We've done our big shapes and we're on to step 2. Smaller shapes. Simple, easy. So instead of drawing a window, find something which represents your windows. What is a shape which represents the windows on each of these houses? Equally, find little things. I like all the planters which are kind of along this, what I assume is a balcony. They add a bit of fun. They are, however, just simple, small shapes. Now, as we move through the image, the key thing here is to just get enough variety into these shapes that they stay interesting, but not too much variety that we're creating too much chaos. So we can kind of look at each building and notice each building has a sort of slightly different type of window. And then we use this repeating pattern, these repeating ideas to make all our windows work. Because if one looks like a window, our brain will immediately understand when we look at this, all of these things must be windows. There's a bit of accuracy that we're probably after here. So we can, again, just cross-check. Where exactly do the windows meet or overlap? If we draw lines between them, we can work out, well, this is supposed to be a little bit higher and a little bit lower than that window, for example. And again, this is not about perfection. This is about getting it about right. This is the key message for all of these kind of sketching processes, is they're nice and quick and easy and loose. So if you get it a bit wrong, that's fine. You just do it again. It only took a few minutes. You can just have another go at the scene and explore it in a different way. Again, we're still just repeating our windows across the scene until we've built up enough detail. Here I made some mistakes again, not letting it bother me, just correct them a little bit and move on. We won't even notice by the end. So we've gone from big to little. Time for the end of step 2, those tiniest shapes. Now those tiniest shapes are kind of really textures. So I like doing these swirly looping marks for suggesting water. But then we have more definite textures elsewhere. We've got brick marks. I'm not one for drawing every brick. Instead, I'll draw a suggestion of a few bricks. And I'll start off with too few because I can add more later. So if I find a few of these bricks hanging around, pop them in, a little bit of other textures, it'll start to work. Then pick out other things which jump at you. I love these columns. So I'm going to do my version of these columns. Little swirly marks with some vertical lines coming down. That's my suggestion. Do not pick out every detail. It would be very easy to keep going and going and going. I could try and draw every single tile. I could try and draw every single window pane. But then we would have this page absolutely full of ink. And it's important to remember that the world doesn't actually have these lines. The world has subtle shifts in colour and tone, other blocks of colour and different shadows. And our ink is just always a bit abstract. So if we want to do a perfect image, we already started off with the wrong tool. Instead, we're sketching, we're creating our version. Now, step 3 is where we just extend our version a little bit more. So we do some bold lines. Here, mostly thinking about shadows. I tried to use my same fine liner and didn't really work out. The reason is I'm having to press too hard and it can make it feel a little bit scribbly. Instead, if I change to this bolder pen, this is a chisel marker in this instance, I can very easily create these nice bold lines. And these nice bold lines, just picking out where I feel there's a depth of shadow, where I feel there's an important object. Simple things like that. What jumps out to me? And I'm popping a bit of a bold line around it. And these just crisp up the image, as well as start to suggest a little bit of 3D-ness. So suddenly I hope you're starting to see, as I do this, our image is kind of coming together. We can understand it a little bit more. And also some of those mistakes, like on the roof on the top right, you just don't see them anymore because they're textural marks now hiding behind these bold marks. Notice how that simple bold line in the window, for example, I think made it hide away a little bit. Now step 4, worryingly close to being finished, aren't we? It's time to grab loose colours, some watercolours. That's no use using a tiny brush. I've got here a size 24 round or a 1-inch flat. These are big brushes, and that's what I absolutely love using, because with a big brush comes plenty of water. So here's my big tub of water, and with plenty of water comes soft, interesting, exciting colours, and we get the most of our lovely range of watercolours and how watercolours kind of just work best with water. So I really encourage you, even if you're not silly enough to use a giant brush, to use one which is big enough to do big things, but also, like this flat brush, flexible enough to do little things, flexible enough to, pick out a few details here and there. Now, it's important to recognise that with watercolours, stuff happens. Look, a splatter, that could ruin my day, or we could just go with it. So I'll do some more splatters. And then I'm going to use my colours loosely, painting a wash over the whole painting and looking for reflections and things like that to just capture the underpainting. And that's what this is. This is not the finished painting. This is the lightest tones in your image. And we'll add some bolder stuff in a moment. Then we find shadows. So this house is white, but it's not white, is it? If we look at it, to me, it's like a blue. That shadow is causing a bit of a blue feel. Then we've got these interesting reddy pinks. Now, instead of trying to do two different things, I'm going to repeat that same kind of reddy pink wash on the second house. And the principle of keeping things simple, repeating similar ideas through your image, I think is very sensible, and I think makes things more interesting to look at. It shows you've thought about it. It shows you haven't just dived in and tried to copy the world. You have created your art, and it keeps things from becoming muddy and overworked. So in each of these little touches where I'm just touching in a bit of colour here, a bit of colour there, I'm using the same repeating mixes. And here we have the idea that every colour we add is a decision. Every decision adds to that overwhelm. So if we repeat things, if we keep it simple, we'll be less overwhelmed. Now these roofs, they're a real highlight, aren't they? I mean that in a literal sense. They're bright and bold. So I'm picking some of my brighter, bolder colours at this stage to let them jump forward. Then we just gradually work around. We've got the sky, not done that yet. Here, let's be brave, do some splashes. And then we can connect those splashes with a bit of soft brushwork. Picking up enough water onto a brush, we can move it around. We end up with this really interesting sky that flows together and also incorporates those splashes that we did at the beginning, those yellow splashes which came from an accident. And there's a key idea again here that these mistakes, these craziness are actually part of the fun. Mistakes are our superpower. Now in a moment we're going to let this dry, but first I'm going to take off some of the surface water so that we can come in with a dark, deeper bit of colour to finish off our lovely painting. It's really important though now to let this dry. This step cannot be overstated. It's really important to relax in the process, and when you have a sort of watercolour given opportunity where the page needs to dry, then go make a coffee, go have a walk, go have a sit somewhere, and then come back when the page is dry and you're feeling fresh. Now if you are enjoying this, then please consider joining my completely free course, no strings attached. There's a link in the description and it will get you kick-started with your loose sketching and urban sketching journey. Come join me there and we'll have a bit of fun. But more importantly, stay here first because we've got to finish this. Now we've got a touch dry piece of paper. That means when I touch it, it's slightly cool, but when I rub it, it doesn't smudge. We don't want a big brush anymore. We want a smaller one. Now this might actually be too small, but let's see how we get on with it first. We're going to pick out these little details. And that's why we want a smaller brush, so we can control sort of the amount of colour we're putting down. The problem with a smaller brush is that it's going to be a bit darker, and I'm going to have to keep going back into my palette over and over again, pick up more pigment, because it also will dry out quickly, which can lead to this kind of overworked feel where everything feels really busy. Nonetheless, for little details like this, you can see it's nice and easy to control. We can be quite precise, popping down all these little shadows. What I'm using is a range of blues and purples and neutral colours to fill out all the windows, for example, and all the little dark shadows. But then look here, we've got some blues. So let's find some blues and we'll mellow out these darks, or make these darks more lively actually, with a touch of blue. This is a nice way to lift your shadows. Then we can also use these slightly darker colours to lift the brightness of the image. Notice how this, exactly the same colour going on top as before, a little bit of red, and it becomes so much more interesting. It really jumps off that page at us just through the process of layering. And this is why it's important to allow our colours to be sort of loose and soft, because then we can layer them. If they're too busy at the beginning, these layers won't work. They'll just become dark, overworked, and they won't be watercolours essentially. So we're working around and just picking out, again, a few really interesting bits and a few important bits like this river. So here we can actually demonstrate a really important principle. I'm popping this green over the top, but look at how that green doesn't totally cover the colours underneath. We still see those reflections coming through. And that's because watercolours are waterproof. They work on layers. As long as it's dry, the layer underneath will be waterproof and you'll get this glazing combining effect. It's sort of a bit mind-bending at first, but when you try it out, and please do try it out, you'll find it's great. And now we wait again, or if you've got them, grab some watercolour pencils. Now these are one of my favourite brands, for no reason other than because I like them. There are loads out there which are also very lovely. Now watercolour pencils are flexible. They can be used when the page is still wet, so we don't have to let things dry, and we can just pick out a few more details, a few more textures, and similar to what we were doing with the watercolours, these kind of richer tones. Similarly to our watercolours, we don't want to overcomplicate things. So each time we're adding something new, we kind of want to do a bit less with it. So we want less of the watercolour pencils than we had of the bold colours, and we want the most of those loose underlying colours, that kind of layer of light at the very beginning. And again, think flexibly. So watercolours, you can add that exciting, interesting splatter. You can even paint directly from them. So you can pick up the pigment and paint on the page. Get this kind of idea of painting from a palette. Finally, I'm bringing back my nice bold pen and we can add a few more dark lines. Now, if you feel your painting is a bit overworked, add more dark lines, as simple as that. And those dark lines will make it feel simpler. If you think your painting looks fantastic, then good for you. That is brilliant. Don't ruin it with more pen. Just do a minimal amount of pen. like that, add your signature, and we are done. This is my version of this scene. It is not the exact version, but the point of urban sketching is to make it your version. Another nice little thing you can do to finish off is just scribble down your thoughts. And one of my key thoughts from this kind of sketching process is how much fun I have when I keep it simple, when I make enough decisions that I feel like it's mine, but not so many decisions that I get overwhelmed. Now, if you've enjoyed this, please do hit the like, the subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know how it went, because I would love to hear how these processes help other people, or if there's anything else people want to hear about in the future.